Hello, welcome to the August 8th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14, as well as the operating system, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics as you watch it. You can watch the live streams afterwards, and there will be an index pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so you can quickly navigate to particular topics. And if you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that great website so you could search through all of the different topics and immediately go to, through, up to 5 years of live streams. And we have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They do it to have it a better community experience for people. So we will give special thanks to them. We'll also give special thanks to and kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So if you're looking for tutorials, links, downloads, it's a great area for that could enhance your Cubase and Steinberg experience. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I generally focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. And I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. We have Stefan from Sweden. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude and Jan from Cubase Index on. We have Uno Memento joining from Finland. All right, we have Benny joining from Sweden. We see Sable Winters from Bay Area, California. All right. Okay, reading through. We see Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. All right, we have Dennis Faustino just saying, "What's up, Greg?" All right. We have Soren from Sweden saying hi to others. We have Randy from Radar the Band from Dallas, Fort Worth. I was in Dallas yesterday just for the day, do some training and flew back. All right, we have Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. It says, hi from Las Vegas. Can you move the ruler track, or does it always stay at 0 as a starting point? Okay, so let's say we have a ruler track. So we'll go ahead and add our ruler track, and I'm going to put this into seconds. Okay, so as we go to add a track, we can see that we're going to have, because right now our time is set, so we look at here, we can see we have measures at the top and we have our seconds here. So if we don't want this to start at let's say at 0, what we could do is say, let's say for instance we want 2 bars before. So if I go to my project setup, so let's come over here to your project setup from the project menu, and we could just say, okay, I want to put 2 bars of time. So now when we do this, we have now a a -1 measure, a measure 0, and starting at measure 1. But we see our time here is still at this point starting at 0. But if we want to offset that, I think if we go to the project menu and we say set time code at cursor, so instead of this being at 4 seconds and 24 frames, I'll just zero this out. So we'll say OK. So we'll get this message, you've modified the timecode offset. So we've done an offset with our timecode. It says, do you want to keep the project content at its timecode positions? I'll say no. And we can see that now when we start and we go to where our position was, that our time will be set to 0 seconds. So if we go to, let's say, our studio menu, we look at more options, we'll see our time display. You can see now that as we do this, we can have kind of a negative time value. So I'll just come here, let's go to seconds. And so right wherever you want it to be 0, you could just, at this point, you know, if you want this to be at 0, just go to your project menu and say set time code position at cursor, and then you could have that particular time start right where the cursor is. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dallas. All right, so we have Casa just checking in from Algeria. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. Always wonderful to see the artist known as Love. And he's already hit the like button. All right, so we have Dennis Faustinos just checking in from Tanzania. Thanks for joining us. We used to have people earlier on live streams a couple years ago that were regulars from Tanzania. All right. So we see Lyle checking in from Phoenix as 3 a.m. Thanks for joining us today. All right. All right, and we have Edge Buyers. It says Greg Scott checking in from Las Vegas. All right. All right, so we see how can I apply fade in and fade out, as I can't do that in Cubase 14. All right, so say we want to take this particular file. All we would have to do is we have like these in the upper corner of an event. We could just come over here and just grab those particular handles. So grab the upper handles. So if you grab the one on the upper right, that would do a fade out. And the upper left hand corner would do a fade in. So that's, and if we wanted to edit, we could just come right over here and say, okay, I want this as my fade in. We could set it as default, or if I wanted to have a separate, let's say a sinusoid fade out, we could apply those particular fades just like that. Another method of doing a fade quickly is if we have the range tool selected and you hit A, that will do like the fades to range. So if we wanted this particular, so if we have the beginning selected, we could just hit the A key and that would do the fade to the end of the selected range. So if I come here and select to the end of the event and hit A, it would automatically do the fade out starting at that particular event. If I have the range selected in the middle and hit A, the letter A, we'll do fade ins until the range selection starts, and when the range selection ends, at this point, it'll do a fade out from that position. So let me know if that makes sense for doing fades, but it's pretty simple. You could also just come over here if you wanted to write a fade into the file. If you go to your audio menu to processes, you could choose fade out, and that would automatically take the particular file and just write a particular fade right there. Hang on just 1 second. right, sorry for the interruption. So so that would write the fade in. So, or conversely, if we wanted to do it on the file itself, so this is actually changing the file, we could just select the beginning and do a fade in. And this doesn't necessarily have to be at the beginning of the file. So if I come here, I could select in the middle of the file, and let's say, okay, let's do a fade in directly there. So we could just simply do fades several different ways. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. Okay. All right, so we see Bratman Studio. Rick is getting ready for a big weekend. We have VS Terranova just saying hi from Amsterdam. Tony Trunzo joining from Australia, outside Sydney. All right, Edge Buyers asks, I have Cubase Pro 14, Windows 11, and I'm having trouble with not being able to pan after I send all my vocals to a mix bus. Is there anything I'm missing? Can you please help me out? So probably what's going on is you sent it to a monophonic mix bus instead of a stereo bus. So if we are here, let's say we'll take this particular project. All right, so let's say, what did you say? You wished it. So if we send this to a bus, so I'm going to right click and let's send the group track to the selected channel or to a group channel. So I'm going to make this a mono bus. Okay, so as soon as we do this, so now when I come to here, since it's being routed out, we don't see any of the panning because it's being sent to the group, and we could pan the group. But if that is sent to a stereo group, so again, we could select your vocal, right click, go to add track, let's add a group track to that. So now that the destination is somewhere that can be panned, that is stereo. Now, as we do this, I can still pan within the channel. As well as the group. So if the destination doesn't have, if you're sending it somewhere to an output, if you're sending it to a group that's mono that doesn't have any panning capabilities because it's only a mono input source, then the panning would disappear for you. So let me know if that helps. All right, wonderful to see Vince checking in from Winnipeg. It's Fly V. All right, see Dallas LaRue just says, that was very helpful, Greg. Thank you. So you're welcome. All right, you see Sable Winter saying hi to others. All right, we have Vicken Ishkanian saying hi from Chicago. Thanks for joining us again. All right, we have Big Mike from Long Island, New York. So, yeah, my wife grew up in Bayport, Bayshore area until she was like in 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade. Nice area. All right. You see Vince 5E's out of the studio today. He's at his parents' cabin. Have a good time. All right. We see Anthony Clark joining from Canada. We have Mark Winslow saying aloha from Honolulu. All right. See Sable is back home in San Francisco Bay Area. See Mark Rabin joining from Montana, just expressing his gratitude to people in the live stream. And we will give a big woof to Mark Raven's dog Stella. So everyone say woof. All right, we see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, we have Barn Door Recording Lawrence joining from Rhode Island. All right, Rishab Saxena asks, hey Greg, can you explain the use of the nudge feature in Cubase when we already have grid and snap? So when we're nudging events, so there's kind of two different approaches to it. So one is just to nudge the cursor. So let's say if we want to, so we have our cursor here, I'm going to hit the command, and then so we have, let's say our grid here is set to bar. So when I hit my control or command key plus the plus symbol on the numeric keypad, that will take me back. So as we do this, I could just simply come over here and move back by measure. And I think if we do this by beat, now I could nudge the playhead position. All right, so we could think of the grid as being the resolution of this. If we have an event in our project, so let's say I come here, and now I want to nudge the particular event based on, so we have our grid that's set up, and now when we nudge, so I'm going to hold down, I think it's control and the left and right arrows, that now I could nudge the event. So even though we have the grid, we're nudging and moving the events based upon the grid size here. So if I say, okay, I really want to be precise, I'm going to do 16th notes, and now we say use quantize. Now when I move the notes, we're moving and we're nudging the event. So we could nudge the playhead position or nudge the events. So again, just both holding down control or command, the plus and minus to move the playhead position on a numeric keypad. So minus on the numeric keypad, plus on a numeric keypad, and just control or command plus the left and right arrows to nudge the selected events. So when we do this, also realize, so the grid and snap, if I don't have my snap on, we still nudge based on those values. I could move the events kind of completely off grid. So let's say right now if I'm nudging events via bar, but I freely want to move it so that it's not bound by the bar, I could freely move stuff, and that's what turning snap on and off is. So now if I want to have something that's kind of off grid, I would just turn the snap on and off. When we go to nudging, there's also the option to, by default, it'll be set to link to grid. But if I wanted to nudge, let's say, 10 milliseconds, but still have my grid, my master grid set to bars and beats, what we could do is say, okay, I want to nudge in seconds, and I want this to be 10 milliseconds. So now, even though my master timeline is set to bars and beats, let me clear my throat. So even if my master timeline is set to bars and beats, I could nudge in a completely different time format as well. So now I'm choosing to nudge in 10 milliseconds. So you see that it's not that the cursor is moving over, the event is moving over. So we think of nudge as moving the playhead or moving the event, and that could relate to the grid, and snap on or off will allow us to manually move stuff, but won't negate the settings or won't ignore the settings for nudging. So let me know if that's helpful and makes sense. You see Anthony Clark says we need a flag for the Cubase nation, and I think Jazz Dude brings up a great point that it's international, so we'll make an Earth flag. All right, Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. We have Ramesh Hazarika official joining from India. Thanks for joining and being part of the community today. All right, so we have Pedro says, sorry for bothering. Do you guys have any idea when is Cubase entering discount? So there's usually a summer sale, but nothing that is their current promotion is going to be mostly on VST instruments with the summer deals. But we'll see what happens. But generally there's a couple of sales per year, but they generally don't announce it ahead of time. So we see from Etienne Lane says, hey all, so do you think we'll have 50% sale end of August on Cubase, as is the norm for the last couple of years? So I guess we'll have to wait and see when the sale, if there's a sale, when it starts. All right, we see Flowmaker on, sharing a sense of humor. All right. All right, so we see Sway TV and Recording Studio just saying hi to everyone. All right, we have Greg joining us from Athens, Greece. All right, Flowmaker just says, say Cubase is best. All right, let's see if we get some more questions coming in. If not, we'll go to mailed in question. And just one quick reminder, we will be having our 500th live stream. We'll be doing some giveaways. Next 1 week from today will be our 500th Club Cubase live stream on since we started, ramped it up since COVID. So we'll be doing some giveaways. We'll do our live stream trivia. And usually Nick, who's was always the winner, but he hasn't been as involved recently, so it could be more equitable. Usually Nick gets all the answers in live stream trivia, so we'll be opened up probably for other people. All right, so FlyV is asking, on my new laptop's got a whole bunch of power plus battery features to reduce the carbon footprint. What's everyone's thought on using these? So what I would do, so I would shy away from doing any particular types of like energy saving functions, because what it's doing, is just kind of throttling your CPU. So if you're running on battery, then, I think that it would, and if you're not doing anything like, recording, that those are, laptops are often, like one of their biggest measurements or criteria is battery life. So they'll try to make your laptop run much slower so that the battery life is longer, and that will have a direct kind of, effect, a negative impact on your audio performance. So when in doubt, like when you go to your studio setup and we select, I think it's going to be in the audio system on a Windows platform, you actually have a Steinberg power scheme. So you could use that, and that would give you the most reliable power settings for your audio system. So I would always kind of recommend doing that for the audio system is running the Steinberg power scheme. I think it's could be a bit more a bit more of a marketing thing. So probably I would say that the impact of turning on like power saving modes to having your USB audio interface or your USB controller shut off because it's saving a tiny bit of power, I think probably aren't worth it. right, so we see Pedro just says, thanks, I'll keep an eye on the live. Aren't you thinking of adding a camera for you? So I would do a camera, but I don't want the camera necessarily covering up part of the screen and me having to move like my image of me talking around. So I think it's more important to actually have all of the screen visible all the time. I'm already doing a lot of monitoring, like the live chat, doing the live stream, as well as, have all the live stream settings going on. So it's a lot of juggling already. So, and I don't think anyone really wants to see me. They just want to see what the functions in Cubase are. So I don't want to have my video, of me talking cover up inadvertently part of the program that I'm trying to show. So, with Cubase, we use just about every part of the window effectively. So I think it's more important to show those things rather than me having to move the video of me talking, which probably isn't that interesting to watch. But let me know if you guys think differently. All right, so we see Elon says aloha from Vegas. Grid relative changed my life. Haha. All right, so if you're not familiar with what grid relative is, it's a great feature. So let's say in this particular area, I have this event starting here, and I'll just make it shorter for demonstration purposes here. All right, so we have this event. This event is a little bit ahead of the beat. All right, so when we have grid on, so I'm just going to come over here and I could just have this snap to, let's say, the beginning of the bar, like that. All right. So, but what if I wanted to maintain its relative position to the start of the beat? So let me just turn this off. So if we want to do that, we could switch it to be in grid relative mode. So now as I snap to the next measure, we are still the same amount of time that's off. So we'll undo. You can see that our cursor line, the white vertical line, is indicating where the beat is. And now when I move, it's going to snap and still keep the relative position of the event based on that snap position. So it won't snap, the beginning of the event won't snap directly to the grid, but it's the offset from the start of the event to the grid is maintained. So it's a cool feature a lot of people don't know about. All right, Vicken asks question, regardless of the recording format, does mixing at 96K in Cubase provide any advantages over 48K in regards to latency, quality, efficiency, even if samples and sample library instruments are in 48K? So when you're generally running at a higher sample rate, so if you have a project at 96K and one at 48K, running it at higher sample rates can minimize the latency. So it can be a little more responsive because the latency can go down, but at the same time, there's more processing going on to the audio. So because we're processing, twice the bandwidth of the audio recording. So that could add a little bit of more audio processing overhead. And I would say, if you have a contemporary computer, it's probably not a huge issue. If you have like an older legacy computer of some kind, then 96K may not be as viable as 48K. I think it could, depending upon the material that you're recording the audio of, 96, there's some material that 96K could benefit if you're doing let's say a really squeaky clean Americana folk, maybe country with a lot of acoustic elements with long reverb tails or classical music. 96K can be advantageous if you're doing like maybe a hardcore rap, a punk or death metal type of project. 96K, you may not notice the benefit of it. So there's a lot of subtlety required. The 96K can, have the sound open up a little bit. It can be subtle. My rule of thumb is if the audio doesn't sound good, it's generally not the sample rate's fault. So you could capture great audio at 16-bit 44.1 or 24-bit or 32-bit integer 384K. You can make great recordings at any of those sample rates, but generally running a higher sample rate can make it more responsive because the latencies can get a little lower, but you would offset that by having more audio performance because every plugin, every EQ is processing twice as much information. So you could figure out kind of the balance of when a project could really utilize and take advantage of 96K, or if the project is fine at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Best Korean Jesus coming out of lurking mode, saying starting strong with the Friday questions. All right, we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Sound Foundry Studios wishing everyone a happy Friday from Windsor, Ontario. All right. All right, RWP Records. Is there an easy way to move an old project from one template to a new one? All right, so if we have a project, what I would do is, an easy way that I find to kind of make a template. So let's say I want to take like this song as the basis of a template. So what I would often do is come over here. I want to do a new project. And the thing with templates is we don't necessarily want all of the audio files and media files that are in an existing project to make a difference in the template. So let's say we choose a new file here. I will, at this point, let's go to import tracks from project from the file menu. So I will come over. Okay, so I'm going to take this particular project. So we're going to import the tracks. And we do this, I'm going to select all of the events, and then I'm going to say the track data to be imported. I'm going to say I want the events and parts, and I don't want the channel and inspector settings. So, so we could do that, but most important thing is just say, okay, I don't want the events and parts. So, here I selected all of the events. I come over here, and now we have all of the events. You may want to, at this point, if you're utilizing it as a template, to select all the tracks. And I want all of the mixer settings to be at 0 dB. So I would enable Q-Link and then click on Absolute. And at this point, I'm going to click Control or Command on one of the faders, and we could now reset kind of all of the faders to 0 dB, and then at this point, save as template. So this way we're not necessarily taking the values like the mixer fader positions if we want to build a template. So again, come over, import tracks from project. You can select the project and uncheck events and parts. So you want to select all, and we don't want any of the media. And then once we level out the mix console is a good thing to do, and then just come right over and choose to save as template again. Okay, so we see from Elan, just says, I'm not sure if this is a follow-up to the templates question we just answered, but it just says yes, especially for copying, let's say, background vocals into another chorus. So if you want to, let's say if we have a template, if we have our project set up and we want it to do, like background vocals. So let's say, let me just open up a different project, add some background vocals, and you want like a quick way of adding like vocal tracks. Just open up. All right, so say we have background vocals here. So if I wanted to, like, double the amount of background vocal tracks, like for quickly, like layering, there's a macro that you could utilize. So if we come over here to edit and we go to the macros, there's going to be one for duplicate selected events without data. So this is standard macro. So now you can just kind of come over and then have those particular tracks duplicated. So, or if you wanted to, if you wanted to spread the panning out for these, you could just right click and say duplicate and then adjust the panning for all of those tracks. So let me know if that's kind of what you mean or if I'm misunderstanding the follow-up there. So we see Sable is going to fade into the background. All right, so we have Roland Stuff joining us from Sussex in the UK. Just hoping everyone is well. Always wonderful to see Michael Teens in Weatherford, Texas. Thanks for joining us today. I believe the virtual ice cream distribution will begin. All right, we see Vicken just says, thanks for the answer, Greg. Wonderful to see Captain Energy Music joining from outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. See Steve Thompson saying hello. All right, so we have Bim Bim just saying, hi Greg, how do I change the tempo in the scene in video but not change it to other scene of the video? Thanks so much. Okay, so let's say we have a, just get to new project here. So I'm not sure if you want to change the actual, I assume we don't want to change the tempo of the video. So let me just import. Let me adjust my project offset here. Okay, so let's say we have our tempo going on here. All right, so I'm going to add a tempo track. Okay, so this is, when you come over here, I'm going to open up my video window, and you can do that by hitting F8. So we'll just come over to our video player. So as we come over here, so let's say if we want to And so we have, let's say we're starting with 120 beats a minute. And let me make sure.
With many beautiful spots to enjoy urban life. Having a long and exciting musical history, Hamburg has always been home to an amazing...
So let's say, okay, we have our tempos and we want to change the tempo. So let's say right when we come here to this particular scene, all right, we see the Elfie in Hamburg. That's the beautiful new concert hall. And if we want to, so right now, let's say we're starting off our tempo. We'll just do it at, we'll say 132 to start. Okay, so when we get to a particular scene, one of the things that we could do is say, and we had video, so I want measure, let's say measure 17, or I want the measure here to go right to where this video is. And there's a little mode that you could enable that if you go to the transport menu of video follows edit mode. So now anytime that we move an event, we could see it update with the video. So we want to go right there and say, okay, we want a tempo change to go. So we're going to just simply come here to the warp tool, and now we could do warp grid. So as we do this, we could just, as I move the event, we could say, okay, measure 14 is going to start right there. So we could have that tempo matched. All right, so now let's say we want that to be, 14, and we stop here at the end where we kind of transition into the band playing at the club. And I want this to be, 3 even measures of music. So what I could do now is just move, measure 18, or we could say, move, measure 19. So let's say we want it to be 4 bars of music. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to move measure 19, and then we could have measure 19 last for this amount of time. So as we play, we'll say, okay, this is where it changes. So now I want measure 19 to be right there. So now as we do this, we'll have 4 measures of music. And then we could just, so let's say we want 2 measures of music for the club. So we can say, okay, measure 21 goes right there. So we can now just kind of tempo map to the video, and you could use different number of measures. So this way we could kind of just, and what we're doing with the warp mode when it's in warp grid is we just move the measures to match whatever we want it to be, and the tempo will be calculated in the background for you. So let me know if that's helpful for what you want to do. Bim Bim. Great. All right, we always wonderful to see Razel Zamini joining from Denmark. All right, so Edge Buyer says, Greg, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, we have Christoph Bax says, this is my hometown. Hi there, Chris from Hamburg, Germany. Yeah, I always loved going to Hamburg. I haven't been since before COVID. I was supposed to go before COVID, like right as COVID was breaking out, and I had to cancel my trip. So I need a Hamburg recharge. But yeah, it's a beautiful city. I always love going to Hamburg. All right, so we have a question from Rob Schmedicke from Tarpon Springs, Florida. It says, when I add an instance of Groove Agent into a project and choose Acoustic Agent Kit, I can't get the tempo of the patterns to match the tempo of my project. When I preview the different patterns, is there something I'm missing? All right, so let's take a look. I'll just do new track version here. So let's say, okay, so our tempo is going to be at, let's say 120. All right, so let's open up an instance of Groove Agent, and let's see if it's going to be an acoustic agent. Okay, so let's go to the acoustic agent. Okay, so let's say I'll just kind of select. Okay, so let's say I can't get the tempo of the patterns to match the tempo of my project when I preview the different patterns. Okay, so let's say I want to slow my tempo down to 80 beats a minute. All right, now let's try and see if it's, so that seems to work as expected. Let's come over here to like our styles and say, okay, I want to, let's see, the garage rock. So let's go ahead and preview this. All right, so I want to come over, let's make it 140 beats a minute. Let's see if it previews in let's make it 60 beats a minute. So even if I change the pattern previews right here, so I'm previewing if I want to go to 120. $160. So when I preview the patterns here, or if I preview, so if I preview it on the pads, that seems to follow the tempo. Let's see if I turn the tempo track off, if that's still. So even if the tempo track is disabled, it's still kind of previewing at the project tempo. And let's see. So as I'm previewing on the pad, let's say we're at 80, and let's double the tempo. So we'll play it now. So let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are, Rob, but it seems to kind of be working as expected for me. All right. So we see Sable just thanking Bim Bim for the video question. And we see from Bim Bim says, yes, I don't know how to say I love you, Greg. Haha. Thanks for helping me out. Great job, Greg. So you're welcome. I'll pull that quote from my monthly report. So, all right, we see Sable Winters gives 3 hearts to that. So, but let me know, Rob. I'll just reread it. So Add instance of groove agent project. Choose the acoustic agent kit. I can't get tempo of the patterns to match the tempo of my project. So let me know if that's different. And let's say I'll test also if we have a tempo track enabled. So let's say we start at 80 beats a minute. And then we come here and we want this to be 160. So let's say if I'm here and I preview, now if I change my song position, so even if I change the song position, the preview pads there will now I'll move it into an area with twice the. So even if you have varying tempo changes at different spots in the song, so if you do have multiple tempos, make sure that you're in the tempo, like the cursor could determine what tempo is being utilized for the pattern preview playback. All right. All right, and we had a question that was mailed in about, and while we're in Groove Agent here, about how to do note repeats. So let's go ahead and show that. So let me just, I'll load up a different kit to start with. So this is a question we get periodically. All right, so let's say we want to do like a quick note repeat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of cut a couple of the pads here. So just hold down my shift key. I'll cut these pads. All right, so let's say we want to do just a basic beat here. Okay, so I'm going to, let's come over here and we'll just build a quick drum map from the instrument itself. All right, so when we want to do different repeat functionalities, what can be helpful often is just seeing that we could have like built-in delay. So let's say we'll build just a quick 2-bar pattern here. Okay, so let me just solo this and so come over here. So, okay, and let's come over here and we'll just do a couple of, I'll paint in like quarter note of hi-hats here. Okay, so one of the things that we could experiment with when we want to do note repeats inside of Cubase is just to utilize, when we come over here, we'll see MIDI effects. So I'm going to come over and say, I want to take the hi-hat here, and we're going to enable and activate, and we'll just do our delays. So now when we kind of play back our hi-hat, we could, choose to have different delays. So without that, we just hear. So even if you wanted to come over here and kind of, you could do like different swing feels to it. If you want this to be like a 30-second note delay. But we could also kind of trigger this a little differently as well. So let's say, okay, I want the hi-hat here. I want this pad. So this pad, I want to have, we're going to activate. Now there's no sound on this pad. I cut the samples. And I'm going to switch this pad to come over to the hi-hat closed. And let's say we want 4 repetitions. And I want a 16th note triplet delayed. Okay, so when we come over here, I'm going to go to my hi-hat closed. I'm going to turn this particular sound off. So we listen to it. Okay, so I want this to go to like G#1. So I'm going to come right over here, and instead of this hi-hat, I just put that hi-hat, and this hi-hat is triggering this pad is triggering the delay that's being routed out to the hi-hat sound. So as we do this, so I can say, okay, I want these, and let's go ahead and play around with the delays a little bit. So if we want the repeats, the number of repeats, if we want them to be damping or not. But let's say for this sound, I want to have like a 30-second note delay. And again, we could route this directly to the hi-hat. So let's say, let's move this one. So we got triplets. And let's adjust the damping here. And we could also do some other stuff like, okay, I want to take this snare. So we select our snare. I want to put a flam on it. And we could come over and say, okay, we want this to be maybe a snare roll. And if we want to adjust the time on our snare roll. So this way you could kind of play around with different, and then it's basically just when you hit this pad, that will trigger the delays and the note repeats directly on your part. So we could just come over and say, okay, I want to take this and let's so we can move this note down to our 30-second notes. So this way we could get a lot of very creative results and basically just trigger a particular pad, and that pad is going to trigger the delays, and that pad is sending those delays to a completely different instrument. So if I wanted maybe the hand claps to do eighth notes, but let's make the hand claps do eighth notes and change the pitch. So we will come over and again select this. Let's do we won't do our flank, we'll choose here. So we're going to we'll do eighth notes on, we'll do eighth note triplets on our snare, and let's change the pitch so that the pitch ascends. And then we're going to send this to our, let's send it to the clap. So now as we listen to it, we can just say we want this particular clap sound. Let's say on this beat here. So now we just come over. And let's say we want to have that do 3 repetitions. Let's make it 16th note triplets or 16ths. Try it. Do 30-second notes. And we give it a couple more repetitions here. So you could do stuff like that and do kind of note repeats and basically just trigger these particular pads, which are triggering the MIDI effects here, which are then triggering the samples. So some creative use that you can do with that. All right. We see Val on, wishing everyone a happy weekend. All right. And Michael Teams is granted Jazz Dude 1 gallon of Texas butter pecan ice cream. All right, Mark Winslow just says, Cubase Pro 14, after I send vocal tracks to a group fader, how do I disassociate the track from the stereo bus so full control is within the group folder? All right, so let's say if we have a scenario like that, what we could do is just come over. Okay, so generally when we send stuff to a group track, let's just get back to, all right, so right now we have our vocal going directly out. So let's say we have our vocal that's going out to the particular just revert this quickly here. So when we often add a group, and especially if we do so let's take our vocal here. What did you say? So if we come here and we say add a group track to the selected track, so let's say I add a stereo. So generally when we look at the routing of the source track, we're going to be using an aux send. So when we come over, we'll say, okay, we see our aux send. Okay, and then here we see the send going directly to the group. So it's going, the track is being routed to the stereo out, but it's also being routed to the group. So if we change the routing, and we say, okay, we don't want to send it to the group via the effects bus, we could take this track. So right now, the vocal, what we want to do is to just simply take the output here from the stereo out, and then we could send this track under output routing directly to group 4 where we are. So and I'm left So instead of using an aux send to send to the group where the track is going to the stereo out as well as through the group track, we could just change the output routing here from the stereo out directly to your added group track. So give that a try, Mark. All right, we see Michael Teams granted John Costigan 1 gallon of Texas fresh butter pecan ice cream as well. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just saying Groove Agent is the most underrated drum sampler plugin ever. All right, Bim Bim asks, one more help, Greg. Does Cubase export multiple MIDI tracks? I usually render each in MIDI track, and then I export. Thanks again. So generally, it's going to export. If you wanted to, if it's going to be like a MIDI file, there isn't like a batch MIDI file export. So, but let me know, like, if you're trying to do, if you're exporting MIDI files for another, another DAW, like MIDI files would have to be kind of exported individually, because we could export like all the MIDI data within the project. But if it's going to be something that you want to recall within another Cubase project later, one of the things that you could do is just come over, if it's being routed to, there is an export selected events. So we could render it as audio there. We could also choose to take like our individual tracks, and we could, if we have these on separate tracks, we could export like multiple, like, so let's say if I want to take this part, my quartet, my string bass, my strings top, I could export these. If you're doing it within Cubase, we could just come over here and let's export the selected tracks. So I'll just put this on my desktop for now. And we'll say bim, bim. And if we do a new project, for instance, if we wanted to just be able to export multiple events back into a Cubase project, and this wouldn't necessarily work for other DAWs, but we could come over and say we exported the selected tracks and we import them as a track archive. And now we could just select all and then have all of the different MIDI events. If I choose to import the media with it, so let's import our track archive again. So we'll choose Bim Bim that we just made, and we'll include the events and parts, and then all of those parts would be incorporated, so we could export multiple MIDI events to be re-imported into Cubase as selected tracks. But if it's going to be a standard MIDI file, it would have to be done one at a time. All right. And if you want to, if you have it to the point, just so I'm not sure if you wanted to export them as audio. We'll show you another method. So let's say if we have So if you wanted to like render it as audio, so let's say if we have a file like this, and I wanted to export the multiple tracks here, so these are all instrument tracks. What we could do is, if you wanted to export it as audio, come over and we'll say let's go to export audio mixdown. We could choose multiple. select all of the instrument tracks. I will just place this and we'll say create audio tracks just so we could see it. And now that these are all kind of going to different instruments, I could just say let's export the audio. And let me give it a smaller section here. So I'll just select, and this is going to be based on, it's pretty small. So I'll just select all of it here. So we go to export, audio mix down, select all the tracks, and then I'm going to create audio tracks just so we could see it. And as we do this, it will now export the individual tracks for you. So if we come over here, we could now just have the audio of the individual tracks automatically exported, and you could have different naming conventions. So if we just want to come over and we have kind of the stereo mix down as well. So this way we could export all of your virtual instrument tracks. So just come over here, export multiple, and select your instrument tracks. And then, all of those can be exported as individual, independent, unique audio files. So let me know if that's kind of what you mean I want to do, Bim Bim. All right, Jazz Dude says, please, Greg, show how we can dissolve all drum parts into separated tracks and audio channels to go even further with sound design. Okay, so let's say, let me just... Okay, so I'll just add, let's say we have a drum event here. So let's add like a groove agent instance. So just show you how you can dissolve your different parts. At this point, let me just open up. All right, so let's say if I have just a pattern, something tempo. All right, so let's say I have this pattern in my project. I'll do hip hop Christmas music. All right, and I'm going to drag this pattern onto my project window. All right. So what we could do if we wanted to, so this one MIDI event here, we can see when we go to the drum editor that we could have a lot of different drum parts, notes that will be kind of broken down here. And if we wanted to, see all of the used drum sounds, we could just filter it like that. But if we wanted to, at this point, take each drum sound into its own independent track, you could go to the MIDI menu and we will choose dissolve part. And let's say we'll go and select separate pitches. We could have the display optimized. We'll come over here, hit process. And now when we do this, we could have just a kick if we want it. So let me So now each sound is broken down into its own independent track right here. So instead of having to have everything all on one track. If you want it at this point, this also gives us the flexibility to run separate EQs, effects, filters on each of these tracks now that they're broken. So we could have a different reverb for the snare than the kick if you wanted to break it out this way. So again, to do that, to split like a MIDI drum part into separate tracks, go to MIDI and dissolve part and hit process, and then all the parts will be broken down automatically to independent, unique tracks. Wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. All right, so we see from Flowmaker just says, man, I'm really confused. Should I choose Cubase? Should I choose an DAW for house music, or why should I choose Cubase? Well, I think, Cubase is great for all forms of music. As anyone's career progresses, you'll be doing not just one idiom of music. Some of my best paying projects I ever did, I never expected. When I started doing sequencing, like one of my first great paying jobs was programming a drum machine for an accordion player. And because I knew all of the different Latin rhythms, I could program a drum machine for him. And I would never think that I'm going to work for an accordion player until I got a big fat paycheck. One of my best paying audio gigs was, restoring audio for the boxing promoter Don King for a trial he was on. So I was like, I did, forensic audio work for that. So, if you're just thinking of doing just one genre, Cubase is, phenomenal at many different genres. So it's not just going to be for house music. If you want to take your house music and, okay, maybe I want my house music to get used in a film. How could I add film elements and transform that house music into a film project? How can I do that and have an artist sing and do all my vocal tuning in VariAudio? And I want to do orchestrations using the included Iconica sketch and have the expression maps. I want to be able, to print out the notation using like the beautiful Dorco notation engine for real musicians. Even if I don't read music, I could print out my parts for real musicians to come and make my music better. So I think what you have with Cubase is, no kind of built-in walls restricting your creativity. So, if you want to do a hip-hop track, if you want to do an electronica track, you want to write, Parisian opera, you want to do films, you want to do rock or heavy metal stuff, all those genres can be equally done well in Cubase without kind of predisposing your workflow. And, I think that with Steinberg, you also see that there's a wonderful community of people here that are willing to answer your questions. And every, twice a week, we just come here and answer your questions so that you could utilize your tools and your investment that you've made. Not only a knowledge investment, but a financial investment. So you're getting the most out of your experience in using the software, So we have, next week we'll have our 500th live stream in less than 5.5 years, where you sit here and answer questions with just incredible community of other people that are so incredibly friendly and generous with their time and knowledge. So. And if you have any questions, just, ask, and we'll, be happy to help you out along your Steinberg journey. All right. Okay, reading through comments, we see Jan has received 1 gallon of strawberry gumdrop ice cream from Michael Teams. And another great thing about Cubase is you get free virtual ice creams on live streams. All right. All right, so we see Domini says, hi, using the Halion Sonic MIDI track, sometimes the inspector's stuck showing the main HS fader. Even if I move to another track, any idea how to switch between the selected track fader and the HS main one? Okay, so let's say if so I'm not sure if it's starting from a MIDI file or not. So let me just I'll set up a quick preference here. Make sure my preference is set. So I'll import a MIDI file and have it play back through. Okay. All right. So I'll just find a generic MIDI file here. All right, so let's say we open a MIDI file. Or I'll just create one really fast. So we have a multi-channel, so. Okay, so I'm going to close that and let's import the MIDI file. Okay, so we have our MIDI file, and this should probably all be routed to my Halion Sonic. I don't have program changes in here, so but Halion Sonic is loaded. So it says sometimes the inspector is stuck showing the main Halion Sonic fader, even if I move to another track. Any idea how to switch between the selected track fader and the HS main one? So make sure one that so if we have like the particular sounds that are loaded, so within the inspector here, if we go to, let's say, the routing tab, so right now all of the sounds are being routed to the main output. So we go to mix, these are all going to the main output. But if I go to the oboe track and I want this, so we see that the HSSE main, so the Halion Sonic, if I come over here, I could activate the stereo 2 output. So now that's going to be routed, but we also need to make sure that these particular, so if we have these are being routed to the different outputs. So let's say we have these. I could now at this point, okay, go to the bassoon part. Instead of this going out to the main output, I could say we want to send it to, this particular output. I want this track. And so again, under the routing, you'll just see kind of the main output, and then you could just choose which output is being set. So if I just come over here, let's play the horn part. We can see that this horn part, as we play, it's going to play back the wrong sound, but this will automatically be going to the different outputs here. So try in the routing tab here, just choose the outputs here. So we can see that that's going to output 3. So we can see that these different voices are now being fed to different outputs. So just look at the routing here, and then you could, not only activate the different slots, the different outputs, but you need to also do the routing in the instrument itself. You could have the outputs defined, but if you don't tell in the instrument for this channel to go out to this output, then it's not going to route there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, or if I misunderstood. All right, see, Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of tropical coconut pineapple ice cream. It sounds very Hawaiian, so thank you very much. My son will enjoy the flavor. Mark Winslow says, thank you very much. I owe you a hapia pie. Sounds good. I'll take you up on that. Next time I'm in Oahu, I'll let you know. All right, Uno Memento is reminding everyone to not to forget to press the like button. All right. Sable is impressed with Michael Team's ice cream flavors. There's more ice cream flavors than Baskin Robbins. All right, so we see from Louis Palomino says, hi Greg, how can I mono a sample in Drum Machine and Drum Sequencer? So, all right, so let's come over here. Okay, so let's add a drum track. Okay. Okay, so let's go to our pattern editor. All right, so right now I'm going to have this pattern. So say we have our pattern here. So let's say, I'll just make it a little louder. So, okay, so let's say we want to kind of mono out the like the kick here. All right, so everything is going to be, since it's being fed to like a stereo source, if we go back to our drum machine, we'll go to the group tab. So I'm just going to come over here and route this to output 2. Okay, and we'll make sure. So we go to the mixer. So this is going to, so now at this mixer point, if we wanted to take this particular channel, let's say we take our kick, you know, we could just at this point run a plug-in. So I think we go to, so if you go to like even a stereo enhancer plugin, you could just simply kind of mono it out, or there's also the mix convert plugin that you could use. So say, okay, we just want this to be in the center channel, and not to be in the sides. So you could do stuff like that very easily, but a lot of times, you know, you want the ability to pan the different drums, which is why it's in stereo. So there's a lot of people that always think you need a mono source for kick, but since it's already going to be going to a stereo out, and if you want the ability to pan it, you could do that. But just simply coming over, you know, to the different tracks, and you could just use kind of processing plugins on that as well. So let me check one other thing, see if it's, yeah. All right, let me just check. There may be another quick approach. Okay, so if we come over here, we could also get to channel configuration. And then you see this channel configuration. That doesn't look like we can change it. Maybe just kind of fixed from the source. But you could just run a plugin to kind of mono it out sonically if you need to. But, you know, let me know if there's a particular reason you need it. Sometimes, you know, people think, you know, we need mono for kicks and, you know, but they're always generally going to be going out at like a stereo output. So, all right, so we see Danny B just says, just got back from Ableton to Cubase, feels like coming home again. So welcome back, and we hope to see you on many more live streams so you can get up to speed on all the new features. All right, we see Sable is getting yanked from the background. Okay, so we see from Flyv, it says, I'm off my motherboard, that my Cubase is all set up for. What do I have to do to use a default Cubase setting where I can hear everything? So if it's going to be, if Flyv, if it's going to be like setting up for that your audio interface is routed through kind of the onboard audio interface, as opposed to, you know, like from the motherboard, just come over to your studio setup, and you'd probably see a choice for like a Steinberg USB or Steinberg ASIO driver as one of the choices, and that's a driver that can utilize like kind of built-in audio interfaces or something that doesn't have a dedicated Steinberg driver. So on a Mac OS, it'd be the equivalent of coming here to built-in audio, and then if we select that and go to the control panel, here you could choose, and you may see like another like options page when you open up the control panel, and that's where you could choose that it's going out to my speakers versus a headphones versus an HDMI connection. So it looks slightly different, but if when you choose this Steinberg ASIO driver, it may say Steinberg built-in ASIO driver, go to the control panel, and that's basically going out to the Windows level of the audio driver, but that could be going to multiple destinations. So make sure that you have it set for speakers or headphone out, line out, or often it may default to HDMI output, stuff like that as well. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay. All right, we see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. Thanks for joining us. All right. Okay, so Sable Winters says, question, I'm not using spectral layers correctly to separate instruments. I want to convert each to MIDI. How to? So spectral layers isn't going to convert it to MIDI. So separate spectral layers is intended to take the different instruments and split the instruments. And then if you wanted to take like a bass part, So let's come over. All right, so let's say if we have this song here, and here I've kind of broken down my different parts into, so I've unmixed this already. So let's say I want to take, now we could do this for like a monophonic source. So I'm going to take the bass part here, and this is like our monophonic bass. So I'm going to drag the file from this spectral layer. So once it's unmixed, you'll see all the different elements that will pop up here. So I'll just hide the modules. So you see your different elements. So I drag that to the project window. I'm going to take this particular file, and I'm just going to bounce selection so that it's its own file. And at this point, we could go into VariAudio, and we'll just edit the VariAudio. And at this point, let's add an instrument track. We'll do a Halion Sonic. Okay, and now what I want to do is to come here, I'm going to select this track. We'll go to our VariAudio editor and extract the MIDI, and we're going to put it onto the first selected track. And now, if I did everything right, and let me just come over here and knock this up an octave. So that way I've unmixed the song, I've dragged the bass line out, and then within VariAudio did the analysis and exported the MIDI. So we could do that for like individual, but it's going to be more for monophonic sources. So if we wanted to take the vocal and unmix that, we could do that, or the bass, but it's not going to do like chords from a keyboard part or guitar. So, but generally the unmixing is more audio centric in spectral layers. All right, Val asks, is there an advantage in mixing drums on a 5.1 in a stereo project? Generally not. There's always going to be stuff that won't necessarily be conveyed when people are mixing drums. Sometimes people put the kick, only in the LFE or predominantly in the LFE channel. And then when you're doing stereo, it may not down mix depending on your settings. So I think it's a lot easier to have things messed up than the benefits of mixing 5.1 and folding it down to stereo. So I wouldn't do it myself. See, Sable and Gerald Ely don't live too far apart from each other. We see that Pablo's on the bus and he has new gig time and says howdy to everyone. Pablo is very busy, so all right, living the dream. All right, so we have Artura Formasari checking in, saying hi from Italy. Thanks for joining us. Beautiful country. On vacation there with my wife before we were married. Okay, so we see from Domini had a question about the output routing. It says, please consider, in spite of inspector, I want it rather spark of the mixer fader shown in front of the inspector. It keeps showing the main HS fader even if I move from track to track. Okay, so is it, let's see if we go back, if we still have the project open. All right, so when you import a MIDI file, it's going to be, so right now we have MIDI tracks, and that's kind of what we have chosen. So, but as I select my different tracks here, we could see that the channels, so let's say if I changed the volume of this channel, so with that, okay, so I see where that is kind of shown, but it may make sense if you're doing this to change the default setting to, let's change the import destination to instrument tracks. So let's see what happens. I'll close this, and with that preference, I'll import the same MIDI file. So we'll create a new project. All right, and now that they're instrument tracks, we can see that every one of them is automatically split to different mix console faders. So as we select our different tracks, so let me know if you need to actually put it into Halion Sonic, or if it's just doing that by default. But you could also just choose instrument tracks, and that would automatically give you the independent faders. So as we select, we can see each instrument is automatically kind of broken down like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Louis Palomino just says, great, thanks. We see Gulf Coast Florida Man on. It says, just scored a video of my dog waking up to make it seem like it was a cool robot predator waking up. So sounds like a good project. All right. Okay, so we see Abel did it. It says, while editing vocals in VariAudio, is there a way to auto-quantize just a small section without it affecting the rest of the take? All right, so yeah, let's go take a look. Okay, so let's say if I want to come over here to Okay, so if you want to only, do like just a couple of functions here, so really all you'd have to do is just kind of whatever is selected. So say I want to take this phrase but not the next phrase, and then we could just come over here and correct the pitch just on the selected events. So we don't have to do everything. So, if I want to come over here, let's select these events, I'll hold down my command. So I didn't want to touch these, but I wanted to touch these. At that point, we could choose to just correct pitch on only the selected events and not the overall events. So let me know if that's helpful for what you want. So it's really just a matter of what's being selected. So if I only want to do those notes, or we could just come to the bottom here and just correct those without doing everything. So just based upon the segment selection. So if I want to do those notes without affecting before or after, we could do it like that. So let me know if that's what you want to do. Okay, so we see from Flyv says, my sound device is the Beats headphones, and when I connect them, I can't hear anything. So it also could be when you're using, if you're using Bluetooth headphones. So let me know if they're connected directly into the computer with a cable. That would always be a better choice. But when you do that, you may have to switch. So when you go to your studio setup and you go to the control panel, choose that it would, that it's going to the headphone out as opposed to the line out or to the speakers. If you're running them via Bluetooth, I think Bluetooth can only do 44.1K sample rate. So it can't do 48K. It could be reversed on that, but Bluetooth generally has a fixed sample rate. So if you're working with a sample rate other than that, it's not going to work. Also, the Bluetooth is going to add, like about 43 milliseconds of latency, which could be annoying. So just be aware of that. So if you're doing Bluetooth operations, then you may have to change the project's sample rate. So something to be aware of. All right. All right, City Studios asks, hello, is there a way to create a feedback loop? Yeah, so we work hard not to create feedback loops, but I think that you might be able to kind of create some within like some of the included effects. So let's say if I wanted to take like this clean vocal. All right, so let's say I want to take that, beautiful vocal, and let's see if we can create a feedback loop, maybe using, there's probably like 2 plugins that we might be able to kind of feed into other processing that might create kind of a feedback loop. But generally, we, don't create feedback loops. People would sue us if they created a feedback loop and broke their speakers and stuff like that. So let's come over to like maybe the multi-tap delay, and let's run maybe something that has a lot of so here we could So we could say, okay, I want to take each of the delay taps. So we might. And let's add maybe like. So you could kind of do effects like that on stuff where you get kind of infinite loops going on, but it's not necessarily a feedback loop. So, but generally it's like, we avoid routing scenarios that could generate feedback loops as a rule of thumb. All right, so we see Gulf Coast, Florida man says, when's Cubase going on sale? I want to upgrade, but not at that price. I think it's a pretty good value overall for everything that you get. It's someone who's like, I remember being ecstatically happy when I could buy a Lexicon Reverb, like an LXP1 for like $500. It was like, like a huge thing. And now it's just like, 0.1% of what's available in Cubase. So, but there's generally periodic sales, so just kind of pay attention to stuff. So currently there's promotion on virtual instruments. So, and you can see maybe when that goes on, there's generally always different promotions going on. And, Cubase will come up a couple times a year, usually. All right, so Cyclop is saying howdy from Finland, just popping in. Thanks for joining us. Great to see Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to all the other pets that are nearby. It says, sorry for being late. I was having dinner with my kids and their mom, but I'm back now. So having dinner with your kids is important. So we could always rewatch the live stream. But we're glad you're here and hope you had a wonderful time with your kids and their mom. All right, Pablo only has 2 days without work in August, so that's great. All right, so we see from Sable, just says, thanks, Greg. I'll rewatch this part of the stream and practice this weekend, probably with the extraction to MIDI. Let's see, Gareth is 29 days of concerts that all ended at 4 a.m. All right, great to see Balsa from Montenegro joining. Great to see you back. All right, so we see FlyV just says, thanks, Greg. I got Cubase working out of my headset now. So congratulations. Have fun. Be your mobile setup. All right, so we see from Steve Green, says, Greg, I unmixed a song in Spectral Layers 12. I can see the vocals have unmixed. When I drag the unmixed vocals to the project track, the event just becomes a flat line. Any ideas? So I haven't had any issues with that. Let me just go back, see if I still have the project open. May have, there, should be under recent projects. Still open. All right, so I'll just revert. All right, so let's say we're here. All right, so I will go ahead and All right, so say, all right, so, I usually, just be kind of a, it could depend how you, so when I drag it, try dragging it. I think you could drag it to the project window itself, but if you just drag it to the track area, see if that makes any difference. But if we come over here,
only if time would tell us. Maybe I'd say things a different way. There's a parade that's inside of your soul. And then you were gone.
so see if you're dragging it onto the project, or if you're dragging it like to a track window also. So and it could also be, and see if you get different behavior with that. But I haven't had any instances where I've done it where it's come out kind of flat or empty.
I only looked forever. Looked in the place that I knew you'd be drawn. I turned away and then you were gone.
And see if you solo it first. So see, like if you go to the layers area here, and see if they're actually kind of broken down here. So if you see kind of the layer here, like when it's soloed, and then, so see that it's actually extracted before you drag it in. And, let me know if when you solo it, you see it and it's kind of isolated directly there. Okay, so you see from Abel did it. It says on VariAudio, I meant the auto quantize tool by pressing Q. I select just part of the take and I want to do it quantize as a whole take. Is there a way to only quantize just a selection of it? All right, so let's go back. So I think that there's a key command. I'll assign it in my MIDI remote here. Let me connect my MIDI remote quickly. Okay, so I want to assign let's say this button here. Now let's go to VariAudio. I think that there is a key command where we could just say correct pitch. So I'm going to assign that function to this. All right, so let's go into our VariAudio editor. All right, so now I want to just correct the pitch of those. So try assigning or setting a keyboard shortcut. And again, the function that you'd want to do is, so we'll switch back to the MIDI remote here. And if you just search for either like from the remote control or the keyboard editor, look for VariAudio correct pitch. So you can do it from a MIDI remote device, or if we go to the key commands, you should see correct pitch. So I think I probably set that myself, but Command Option Shift V. So now when we just have notes that are selected, we could just correct those notes without affecting the other notes. So try using the correct pitch function. I don't think that there's a setting on the side. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. All right. Don't want to sneeze on mic. It'd be extra annoying. But I don't think that there's a... So we could just kind of set just a key command for that without doing the quantize. So give that a try. Abel did it, and let me know. See, Flyv is just saying, I noticed the sample rate changed when I connected from them. Now your voice is back to normal. So yeah. Jazz Dude's wondering why anyone would need a feedback loop. So. All right, Rishab Saxena just says, what are some best ways to give humanized feel to drums in the drum editor? I want to target individual elements differently. Okay. All right, so let me just build a quick beat in the drum editor. Okay, so let's just come over. I'll just build a quick beat here. So let's say, okay, let's... Okay, so expand it out. All right, so we'll just do one measure pattern. All right, so let's say we'll start here. All right, and let's put in all right, so like one of the things that you could actually do is just kind of put in different rhythms. So let's say I want to put in eighth note triplets here. Something that can help with drums overall, and just open up my control room, make it just a little louder here. All right, so you know, playing with velocities, like the hi-hats sound like very mechanical. I'm not going to change the feel, but I'm just going to adjust the velocities. So even, I'll just take this and so, you know, taking just the so let's say if we solo the drum, you know, we can just kind of come over here. So even though these are all completely straight, if I just kind of grab, see where we were before, and then if we undo that, just changing the velocities. All right, so but let's go add a couple more, maybe percussion. right, and let's just put these as like triplets or dotted values. Let's say dotted eighths. All right, and we'll do triplets here. And I'll just kind of tweak these velocities down a little bit. So if we wanted to do like a groove quantize, I'll just take these out, but let's concentrate on. So if I just select the hi-hats, so now that I have these selected, if we go to like our quantize panel, so let's just add swing to just the hi-hats. So we'll make it kind of like an aggressive swing. So now when I come over here to quantize, and I can say I want these to be quantized with a different swing factor. So now if we again kind of come back to, we can place different kind of rhythmic feels and swings on selected notes. So we don't have to quantize the entire drum part. We can just kind of apply swing just to the selected elements. So, and then like something that a lot of people miss often is so really kind of play around with like velocities. But so whatever that you select, you can apply different amounts of swing, and and it's really, I've been fortunate to sit with Teddy Riley and make beats with him and stuff like that, and do clinics with him where we'll do beats together, and he will do beats and you just don't think it's and he'll start with a kick and snare. It's like, those don't work, and he throws a hi-hat, and then it's like he throws a percussion thing in, and the kick, snare, and hats aren't working at all, and then he'll just do a special swing on the percussion, and then it all comes together and makes sense somehow, and it's kind of Teddy's gift. But just you could have different levels of humanization for each one. You could come over, so it's easy to do it that way. You could also just have random placements, so if we want to select B1 and C2, I wanted to take these notes, we could go into the logical editor, and then we could also just say, okay, we want to take these notes, and we want to their position, we want to set to relative random values. So we can say between, let's say, minus 20 and 20. So when we take those selected notes, we can now just apply random values to the percussion and just kind of shift them. So even if we were to solo the hi-hat again, so you could kind of randomize, selected notes or all of the notes within your project here and come up with different feels. So you could apply different amounts of randomness as well to parts. On selected pitches or not. So Okay, let me just, my chat field just jumped on me. All right. Mark Winslow just says, possible to make a macro for quickly panning selected tracks left, center, right, to quickly right panning automation. So I'm thinking if we could, so let's take an audio track, we'll take 3 audio tracks, so we might be able to pan it hard left and hard right. Usually, so as we come over, so we could. So let's say this is going to the stereo out. So we could do kind of set it to output to the left or to the right output. So in the project logical editor, but generally the macros aren't for like mix values or specific automation values. But let's see if we could. So if we have this track, it's going to our stereo out. And if I want it to be always coming out of the left channel, so let's see if we could do that. Let's get to the project logical editor. So say we'll take our selected, let's say property is set to is selected. We'll remove this. And we want to go to track operation to connect output. And then for our stereo out, we could say make this. So right now it's going to the stereo out. I could take the selected track and move it to the left. Or I could take this track and kind of put it into the right channel of the output, but there's nothing that would place it, so it's not actually adjusting the panning. It is setting the panning up. But let's see if we do so it's going to do the routing, but let's see if we could do just a generic kind of track preset. We might be able to, before you kind of commit to other processing, this could affect processing. But let's say if I'm here and let's say we have this channel left, I'll save a track preset. But this could overwrite some of your other settings, like if you had other processes on it. But if you're kind of starting your mix, this might work. All right, so now if we come over to our media bay and we go to user presets, track presets, audio. So right now, let's say this is in the center. If I drag this track preset out, let's see if it's, that's not going to, let me just turn the audio track. So let's see if we do left pan, if the panning is going to be, doesn't look like the panning's carried over into track preset. So probably most of the solutions, so I don't think that there's an easy way of doing it. And I think it would always be probably faster just to set the panning here, but I'll mention that as a feature request. Sorry about that, Mark. All right, so we see from Domini just about the question, says, sorry still for my question, no problem, sorry for not getting answered for you. The channel panel that could be hidden or shown located before the inspector will just show the HS fader, but not the selected MIDI channel. No way to disable this option. All right, so let's add Halion Sonic. So let's see if we're doing like a MIDI track. So I'll do an instrument. Let's make it Halion Sonic. Okay, and then I'm going to add several MIDI tracks that will be routed to the Halion Sonic. Okay, so we're here. We can see that we have our instrument fader. We come here. This will be the MIDI volume. All right, so now when we select, so this is going to all right, so I'm going to activate my outputs here in the mixer so that we have, just load up some quick sounds. Okay. Yeah, because I think that this might be, let me just see if we do. Because this here is just going to be for the particular, let's say if we set this here, we go to MIDI 2, that's going to be. All right, so let's say, so this is the instrument fader here. So let's say if we go, so I think that this might be always fixed for the output. Let's set that there. Let's come over here, do the routing. Let's see if this affects it. So once we come here and to route it to different outputs, this fader here is automatically showing and reflecting. So this is at 0 dB, that's at all the way down, all the way up. So as we select, once they're routed to the different channels, whether it's MIDI or instrument, that's what we see between both the channels, and that's just in the routing page. Again, just routing these to to the correct audio output there. So let me know if that's what you want to see, and I can see it in both of the, when we select there, we see that at unity, at all the way down, all the way up, and we see that reflected in both faders right there. All right, we see Terry Gray dropping in while at work. So hope you're enjoying your new SSL. Saw pictures of it. See Jazzy just mentioning older dub delays in the 90s had extreme feedback effects and blue tweeters and mid-range drivers. Yeah, people aren't happy when it happens. All right, we see Fred Corion. Hope you're doing well, Fred. Says, hi, Greg. Is there a way to stem a track, get all the guitars on one stem, and then re-stem to separate those guitars? So currently there isn't a way to do that. Some people obviously can, use panning for that, depending on how the guitars were recorded. We can do it with drums. We could do unmixing it. So once we unmix the drums, We could then unmix the kick, snare, hi-hat, but it doesn't separate guitars, like multiple guitars currently. So maybe in the future. Hope you're doing well, Fred. I'll have to give you a call and catch up. Hope you and Amy are enjoying your summer. Everyone's saying howdy to Fred. All right, Paul Yogesh asks how to find the BPM of a song. So there's a couple different ways. If you have a particular song in, so we'll just we'll come over here. Alright, so say I want to take like this particular song here. Alright, and let's say like our song is changing BPMs. Alright, let me take it off loop here. So, and we turn on our click track. So if I select the file and we go to your project menu, so we hear that the tempo, the click track isn't making any sense with. I could come over. So I'm going to go to my tempo track. And let's go to tempo detection. And now we figured out what the tempo is. And when we do this, it's kind of will give us this time signature of like 4/4. So let's say I want to come over here and let's say, okay, this is where, let's say this is where our song starts. So we'll put our 4/4 in right there. So let's say we're roughly around 140 beats a minute. Now if I want this to be perfectly steady, so it doesn't have its fluctuations, what I could do now is select the event. Let's go to my advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. Hit OK. Now I could turn the tempo map off. Say, okay, let's go to 140. Now it's playing back a perfectly steady tempo. Or if I wanted to play back the original tempo, and I could also just tighten this up. So let's say, I just want to tighten that tempo up and raise it. Or if we want to go back to our original tempo, I want this chorus to speed up. So speed up, and then it's going to go back to the original tempo. So once again, just kind of select the file you want, get a project to tempo track, detect tempo, tempo detection, and then if you want to be able to straighten up that tempo, go to audio, advanced, set definition from tempo, and then it'll be like a tempo parasite, if you will. All right. Let's see, the artist known as Love wants everyone to please hit the like button. All right, Master B says, hi, give me free Cubase. So you could have the trial version. I think it's 60 days. So. All right, so we see from Abel did it, says, so sorry, Greg, not the correct pitch function, but the quantize by pressing Q. It quantizes the whole take within the VariAudio. Is there a way to auto-quantize not correct pitch? Thanks. Sorry for my misunderstanding. All right. Okay, so let's come over here. We'll just... All right, so when we quantize the pitch, so we'll just come over. Okay. Let's see, okay, go to my scale assistant here. All right, so say if we quantize, still seem like it only, we'll just blow it up here. All right, so we have, I'm going to move all these notes slow, like slightly sharp. I just hold down the shift key for that. So let's say if I select these, it's still only doing the selected notes when we do the quantize, so it didn't touch this. If we have nothing selected, it'll quantize everything. But if I have just those notes selected, we'll see that these won't shift when we quantize the pitch. So I'll move all these slightly flat. So now I hit quantize pitch. It's going to do the selected notes and not these notes. So if I select these notes, so I'll undo that so we can see that these had shifted upwards in pitch. But if I come here and I quantize the pitch, that way these aren't affected, but just what is selected. So let me know if it works differently for you. See, Master B says, I want Cubase Artist for free. It's like, I want free mochas at Starbucks every day, but I still have to buy them if I want it. So it'll be a good investment for you. But if you have, like, if you have an audio interface, like if you get a Steinberg UR interface, you could just simply get a Cubase AI version. So, all right, we see Master B says, I just don't want to have pirate Cubase full of hacks. It's like you probably pay for a car, you probably pay for electricity for your house, you probably pay for food. So that's how stuff works. All right, so Balsa asks, when using range selection on an audio event, is it possible to copy that selection with mouse click modifier without the need to cut the range first and then copy? Okay, so let me just see if it is. So I know that we could, so I'm not sure if you want to, let's say if we copy, okay, is it possible to copy that selection with mouse and click modifier without the need to cut the range? All right, so let's say I have this range selected. I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key and drag it over. So we could just kind of copy just like that. So anytime we could just kind of take a particular range, I'm going to start to move it and then press the Alt or Option key. And at that point, we can snap directly to the particular, or we could copy that range without having to split. So let me know if that's what you want to do. Just take that range and place it elsewhere. So select the range, or you could do multiple parts, move it, and before I'm holding the mouse down as I move, and before releasing the mouse button, hold down the Alt or Option, and then just make a copy like so. Let me know if that's what you want to do. And also if you want to take the range selection, if you just use the arrow keys, you could move the selected range and nudge it like this as well. So that would just kind of move the selection range but not move the contents. And then when you want to move the contents, you use the mouse, Alt or Option before releasing, and you've made a copy. All right. All right, so we see a question from Daniela Da Vinci Girl. It says, I did downgrade for my new Mac Cubase from 12 Pro to Cubase 11 dongle version. It's more easy for my workflow. As far as I did understand correctly, Greg, last Friday. So, you know, it'll still, you know, you're, I'm not sure, you know, if anything I mentioned last Friday that would cause you to downgrade a version, but you can, you know, if you have the USB-E licenser, you could run 11, or you could run 12 if you have the license for that under Steinberg licensing. All right, so we see from Steve Green, says, Greg, the spectral layers dragging to track worked. That's great. Says, how do I make it permanent and close spectral layers? So once you have done the, usually what you could do is just in the inspector area here, I generally like to just take the particular file and just bounce selection. Now create a new audio file. You could also just come over here where you see the extensions. So generally that's what I do. So if we have like the it broken out here, if you go to it where you see the extensions, you can make the track extensions permanent. But if I have it dragged out, I just generally very easily come over here and just bounce selection, and that will create a new audio file, because when you first drag it out, it's actually still kind of playing, you know, part of, you know, it's not like a full separate audio file. It's still kind of referencing, you know, because when we drag this out, it subtracts that from playing into this. So what I personally do is just select a good audio and choose bounce selection, and then you could close that out. All right, so we see from Rashab Saxena, says, thanks, Greg. The logical editor trick was sick. So glad it was helpful. All right, Bondrude asks, how do you use spectral layers? What is its use? What's the best way to use it? So what spectral layers allows you to do is, let's say, we'll just jump back to like this song here. So when we have, let's say if we have a piece of audio, you know, and when we do spectral layers, so, you know, when we look at audio, you know, generally we're kind of, this is kind of totally maxed out here, but let's say as we kind of look at an audio waveform, we cut, you know, and if I come here and I choose to cut part of the audio out, in erase, I'm erasing all of the frequencies. So we're looking at kind of like the waveform of the audio. Now, when we load this into Spectral Layers is a spectral editor. So, and if we were to think of what Spectral Layers is here, so I'll just, we'll open it up, we'll maximize it here. So we could almost think of Spectral Layers as being like we take the audio waveform here, and imagine if this was 3D and we rotated it 90 degrees. So what Spectral Layers is now we see kind of the contents based on frequency. So we could actually at this point say instead of cutting the entire audio file, we could choose different portions of the audio file that we want to work with. So, you know, and with this, Spectral Layers is often used for doing, you know, unmixing. So, you know, let's say, oh, you know, I was doing a classical piano recording and there was the pedal on the piano squeaked in a really quiet part. You could see the frequencies here of like a piano squeak. And as we work with that, you can say, oh, okay, I just want to edit out the squeak here, but I don't want to edit out all of the notes that are going on. Whereas most times when we're editing with a waveform, you know, we edit all of the frequencies. So I can't say, you know, my acoustic guitar was great, but I need it to just come over here and get rid of a guitar squeak, but I want it to leave the notes in. So this would allow me to select kind of different frequency ranges and process, filter, you know, unmix songs. So if I, you know, wanted to make the vocal louder or softer in a particular project, I wanted to you know, unmix like different instruments, drums, crowd noise, so stuff like that. So it's not just editing, you know, the entire frequency range. We could edit very specific frequencies, and that's what spectral editing is. And, you know, it's going to be using AI algorithms to, you know, to do those types of tasks so that it makes a lot more sense kind of as you're doing your, you know, the editing approach to it. All right. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. Thanks for joining us today. We have Diamond District Studios joining from South Africa. Memento and Recyclops. It's just talking in Finnish. I'm going to translate it one time. Okay. All right, Daniel Solomon just says, hi Greg, emailed a question regarding the Cubase 14 crash caused by Contact 8 with the Steinberg crash reports. So when I kind of just Googled the data there, it just seems like it's a contact that's causing the crash. I think it was, sorry, I didn't respond to the email. But, you know, just, it was kind of like, I can't remember, it was maybe been Microsoft Copilot that I just kind of copied the error message that you sent. And, I mean, I think it's pretty definitively a Native Instruments issue. But I'll dig up the email and send that to you. So. All right, Daniel Solomon also asks, and how can I select all the tracks with the range tool in Cubase? I tried holding control and dragging, but it only selects the top lane. Is there a proper way to select all the tracks in a vertical range? All right, so we'll jump over to this project, which we've all heard in probably 500 live streams, courtesy of Fred Corey. So let's see if we come over, just get my modify. I thought it was maybe me see if it could be just a tool modifier preference. So let's go here to your preferences or settings, to tool modifiers. Let's get to the range tool. So here it's option plus shift is the select full vertical. Those are the modifier keys which you could change. So now when I do a range, I just make sure I have this zone active. It's usually option plus shift. Let me just try a different modifier. So check in here. So let me try. All right, so let me try just changing the modifier. See if that does it. Yeah, let me just see if I can reset those to default settings. But generally, it's going to be the modifier is going to be set if you get to the editing preferences, the range tool. Let me see if I could just. It's usually option or alt plus shift for selecting everything, but it doesn't seem to be. I'll just try it on another. But yeah, it seems like it's just enabling the quick link in the lower zone. I'll send a report, but check to see if you have the that modifier key here. So under preferences or settings, editing to tool modifiers to range tool, and the select full vertical option. So see if that. So we see question, does Greg's Cubase have a deeper black background color in Mac OS and Windows? Mine is Windows 10 with dark theme on, and in preferences can't reach deep dark like Greg's screenshots or YouTubers with Mac OS. So I'm not running dark mode. So it could be, I'm not running dark mode. I could run if I go to my system settings here, we could choose dark mode, and under appearances. So I'm running the current light mode. So if I go to dark mode here, like when we go to the editors in the background, so it doesn't really affect kind of the dark that we see here. Inside of Cubase, obviously my menus are now inverted, but make sure that you go into the preferences and the color schemes here. So you could say, okay, and when we go to like the project window area background, you could even make it darker than the default settings right there. So, try that and see if that gives you more of the results that you're looking for. So, but I'm not running the dark mode on my operating system until I just switched here. So, but just kind of check those particular color schemes and see if you could tweak it there a little bit. All right, Uno Memento wants to get, let's see, at 3:28, 20 minutes ago, 4 more likes. Great. All right, so Val says, does the spectral edit work with amp noise? Talking about spectral layers. So yeah, you could definitely use amp noise, and I know people now are tending to, capture like amp noise, because what you could do is, kind of come up, let me just, like if you wanted to get rid of, all right, so let's say if we have, something along the lines of this type of, so a lot of buzz in there. So there's lots of people now that are capturing the buzz so that they could use it to filter out. So when we come over here, we're going to say, okay, let's go to our spectral layers. And we could even kind of do this denoising type of function. So let's come over and say, okay. So I want to, we'll just kind of select this is pretty much just all of the buzz coming from an amp. So let's get to the modules and we'll say denoise. We're going to register that noise, apply. And now if we did this right, then, all right, so let's go ahead and just, all right, so if we, so then you could apply that noise profile and kind of, use it throughout the, the other parts of the song as well. And if I wanted to do a couple passes of that, we could just say, okay, let's go to our noise. So versus kind of where we were originally. So if we, and we could just apply it kind of multiple times. And kind of filter it out for you. So yeah, you could use spectral editing is really good for getting buzz out. And if you want to kind of just really hone in on particular frequencies as well, so you could choose different selection modes. So if we want to come over here, you could just say, okay, I want to take let's see, I think one of these we could just do frequency selection. So if you want to, just, where you see kind of like buzz throughout, if we undo, we can say, okay, this is probably our hum. So, we could just kind of take out specific frequencies as well. So, but yeah, you could really do a great job dehumming guitar amps, finger squeaks for acoustic guitars, stuff like that. Okay. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl likes moving the USB e-licenser back and forth. All right, let me go to some other questions that were mailed in. Let me get to those. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, I've come across conflicting info online about routing external effects in Cubase. In one of your videos, you used a different send output and return input channel, but I've also seen others, myself included, sending and returning through the same channel, i.e. send out on channels 5 and return on channel 5. Can this setup work without causing phase issues or other problems? So the one thing to be aware of when we're doing like our audio connections and we have external effects, sometimes what can throw it off, if you are using the same input and output, sometimes the direct monitoring status with any DSP routing on your particular, so let's say if you have an RME card or, something like that, which is kind of famous for having total mix, where you could route any input to any output. And so sometimes if you go into direct monitoring status, that could affect an external input and output path. So depending on your audio interface and the DSP routing of that audio interface, so you could generally use any of the particular, if you're not doing direct routing, you could use any input and output. But if something isn't working as you expect, because, that's why I kind of sometimes use different inputs and outputs, depending upon the direct monitoring status of your audio interface. And once direct monitoring is enabled, how that interface, interacts with the internal DSP routing of your audio interface. Whereas if you kind of use different ins and outs, you're less susceptible to that. But if it's working for your in and out on the same with your setup, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we see question mailed in. I need to separately record vocals and piano. Piano first, vocals second. Having trouble with metronome when recording, me playing, not used to the recording field normally. I play and sing together live. I write my own music beforehand and come prepared to record myself, but I'm having trouble with tempo. How can I naturally speed up and slow down at different parts of the song while recording? Do I need to plan in advance for this? Do I need to just do it all at the same tempo later and go and adjust specific measures? So, it depends if you want to, as you're recording the piano part, if you want to have the metronome as a guide. It's perfectly fine to record different elements, like a different part, and have Cubase follow the tempo. So for years and years, people thought that the sequencer, was kind of the bane to like a musical feel, right? And a lot of people just kind of chose a very simple, easy path and made everything very rigid. Not because it was the right thing for the music, but it was easier for the tools that people were using. So a lot of times people changed the feel of the music to match the tempo or to make it easier with the tools. So they changed the tempo because they wanted to be able to edit easier. But I think you want to be able to go both ways. So one way is do you want to follow the computer as a musician? Or as a musician, do you want the computer to follow you? So you could follow the computer or the computer can follow you. It's really your choice. So if you can record something that feels great and you speed up and slow down, if you need a metronome to set that, then it's no problem. So you could say, when we get to, we'll come over here, and when we get to, we'll go to our tempo and say, okay, at this point, when we get to measure 17, we have a tempo change here. So we go there, and then we do 8 measures, and then we want to, at measure 20, we'll say at measure 25, we want to go back down in tempo. So if you know exactly the tempo feels that you want, you could have the metronome, and the metronome will, play wholeheartedly. So now when you want to switch your tempo, if it's a very specific tempo change, where it's going, you could do that. So you could program Cubase to set the tempo changes for you, and you could play along with that. If you just want to play in and have Cubase figure out your tempo, you could just come over. Let me just import like an acoustic thing. All right, so say I want to take this song.
Maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But it was real fast, dangerous, and certainly a sin. Looking up and then glancing away.
So let's say you just recorded your guitar or you recorded the piano. You could just, whether it's MIDI information or audio, as we showed before, just come over here and go to your tempo track, and let's get to your tempo detection. So as soon as we do this, so I'll turn on I'll just do a quick.
Maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But it was real fast, dangerous, and a mother's blush. It was a 90-second love affair. There was something magic.
So you could now just have the tempo map automatically extracted from what you want to do. So sometimes, people will want a structure to record along with and play with that they know exactly what the tempo is. So if you want that, you could program the tempo changes in Cubase and record with the click track. Or if you know that you like the feel, and it's totally fine for your music to breathe, to speed up and slow down, little bits. That adds kind of a great musical tension and release. But you could then record and have the audio, have the tempo automatically follow what you recorded so that you could have a more natural feel. So if you want to follow the computer, you can program the click track, the tempo changes in Cubase and record along with that. If you just want to, record exactly what you feel without a click track and then be able to edit on a grid, is just do a tempo, record the audio from the piano or the MIDI, do a tempo detection, and then you still have the benefits of being aligned to the grid, but the computer is now following your performance. So you could do it either way and come up with like great kind of tempo maps. So I'll show just Like even like play a good example of my dear friend Wayne Estes gave me a project to work with that we've heard on the live streams many times. And this is like a good example of something that he just kind of played in, and then the tempo map was created afterwards. So if we come over here, we'll listen to it.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school park.
So when you look at the tempo map, this tempo map,
yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you caught me too.
so all those little.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So if you just kind of listen to it, it doesn't seem like it has these little like pregnant pauses, and that works really well. But when we want to have the MIDI and have it aligned to the grid, we just made the tempo map afterwards automatically, so that you could work either way, whatever is kind of your preferred, whatever is best for the music, so you don't have to compromise the feel of your song to get those natural feel. You wouldn't tell James Taylor to play to the click. You would just say, I want the click to follow James Taylor, because he's kind of like his own accompaniment, and he's accompanying himself, and he's speeding up and slowing down to what makes sense musically for the song. And that's totally fine. So if I was recording James Taylor, I would want to do the click track after, and and match what he did, unless it was like something really egregiously wrong. So either way is a great solution to go to. All right, let's jump back to live questions. You can always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, we see Grant Nicholas on, saying hello from Baltimore. All right, we see from Ben Tyerman, says, is there a cross-grade deal coming soon for Cubase Tenuendo? Anyone know? So there was one just a few months ago, so I think in April. So, but currently there's a bunch of instruments are on sale with the summer deals. All right, let's see if there's. All right, we'll see if there's other questions that kind of sneak in. Give it just a minute here. I think we're out of questions on the live stream. I think. All right. We see Gareth has just mentioned Absolute, which is a collection of VST instruments, including Halion, Groove Agent. They're all about half. It's about half price. Gareth just mentioned that Pablo is the hardworking one. Unbelievable, yeah. So can't imagine doing that many gigs, but I guess it beats having a job. So. And Pablo is still young, so you can pull it off late nights. All right, we'll see, given our minute, see if there's more questions. See Capital Razors, thanks, Greg. We see that Michael Teams, they have a new calf in the field. 24 hours old. So is that 3, or did you have 4 previously, or 5? Is that 5 now or 3 now? I'm trying to keep track. So Uno Memento says, do we have any competition coming up soon? Is that like, so I think Friday we'll do some of the live stream trivia to win, we'll give away some prizes. All right, so we see Michael Teams, it's 3. All right. Let's see. Gareth just saying it was birth 2, get 1 free on the farm. So it was a summer promo. So, all right. Okay, so we have a question from Michael Boys, who asks, how do you color the mixer track lanes with 1 click of color? I can color the track lane, but it will not color the mixer. I've gone through the settings and can't find anything for it. All right, so let's say if I want to colorize my mixer channels, let's do something that has some colors in it already. Okay, so I assume it's probably like these colors in the mix console. All right, so let's say if you want to colorize the mix console, if you go to your settings and under user interface, track and mix console channel colors, and let me switch this out of dark mode real quick. Go back to light mode here. All right, so let's come over here to our settings, and then we'll see one you could, so if we add these, I'll hit apply here, so we could add the color to the tracks. So the colors here, so we disable this. So no colors in tracks. Some people don't like those, some people love them. And then we could also have our folder tracks colored, and then we'll see currently we will come over here to our mixer. I'll go full screen on the mix console here. All right, so we have kind of a very flat looking black mixer. So again, go to your preferences settings. So user interface, track and mix console channel colors. And now when we say the mix console channels, just hit apply. And we could also change the color intensity of those. So if you want it to be a little more, brighter or a little more demure, we could just kind of come over there. All right. See, Gareth has to take off. See if there's other questions that sneak in. And Jazzy is just mentioning offer that if you cross-grade to Nuendo 14 now, you get Spectralers Pro free with that. All right, so follow-up question to the mix console colors is, does this work with custom colors? So whatever your current color selection is. So if I change this particular color, so if we go to project, to your project colors setup, and if I wanted to change this color here to make it brighter, we hit OK. Now when we adjust our colors, so we'll say apply, I will so whatever colors that we have there. So so as you customize the colors, those will be reflected in the mix console. So if you have customized colors, those will all show up for you. All right, see, there's another question that comes in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. I'll have an easier time doing my indexing tonight. All right, I'll give it another like 10 or 20 seconds, see if there's other questions. All right. All right, so you see Tim K just says, thanks everybody, take care, and catch you all next time. All right. All right, give it just a little more time. All right, so take care for yourself as well, Gareth. Gareth just says, hope you can make the next Zoom. So yeah, it's a busy time for people on vacation and work projects and stuff. All right, great to see you, Brian. It just says, great job, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Appreciate being part of such a wonderful community. Just always a joy to be able to help people kind of realize their creativity. With that, I wish everyone a wonderful weekend. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we'll see you back on Tuesday for live stream number 499. We'll see you then. Goodbye.